Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be covering this book, Dog Days, by John Levitt. The tagline is, "Magic is a man's best friend." So I bought this in late 2022. I didn't read it until around May of 2023. I found it in the mass market paperback section of Koaz, so I paid only about $3.50 for this book. The listing price on the back of the cover says $6.99, and their mass market price is always half listed, half cover priced. So $3.50 for this book, and I think that should help inform whether or not it was worth the money. This book was copyright 2007, and I have the Ace Mass Market Edition from November 2007. This book is urban fantasy set in San Francisco. Magic exists, and a lot of people tend to be very subtle about it. There are parties where magic users congregate, and occasionally people that aren't in the know show up as well. For the most part, magic isn't grandiose fireballs or summoning or anything like that. It's not really defined well, but the main character is very unique for having a lot of power and not relying on very specific methods to produce his power. Mason, the main character, is working part-time as a musician. He's a bass player. He works with various jazz and blues bands across San Francisco, providing live music, and he plays very improvisationally. He also has a familiar, which they refer to as a djinn, D-J-I-N-N. Not every magic user has them. And these familiars are intelligent creatures that choose a magic user to be with. But while they do live for basically the same lifespan as these magic users, if for some reason the djinn disappears or wanders away or dies, the magic user feels like they lost a part of themselves. It is an important part to this story that Mason has one of these djinn. Usually they're something like a cat or a dog, a kind of pet that is inconspicuous. Some people that they meet in the book have, one of the guys has like a raven that he uses, that he works with. So the djinn are important, but they are not well defined, much like the magic in this setting. So Mason, in his capacity as a musician, he used to also be a magical enforcer. Magic isn't set up in a governmental sort of way in this setting, but certain powerful magic users kind of impose their code of ethics, usually a benign code of ethics, to keep other magic users in check. Mason used to be one of those and no longer does it. But he is known in the magical community as someone with those connections to not necessarily law enforcement, but the watchdogs. He keeps his nose to the ground, he keeps out of trouble, but trouble has a way of finding itself to him, and while walking home after a set, he ends up getting attacked in an alley by an otherworldly creature, and he is shunted into another space, I guess, kind of dimension, and he gets his way out. One, he notices a type of gem, and he picks it up, and two, he shifts part of his clothing back to the other world, which gets himself back to the real world because that shirt ends up acting as an anchor. So he gets attacked a couple times in this story by the villain, but the antagonist isn't known until late in the book. Eventually, he ends up getting back with his enforcer watchdog friends. They ask him to help them out with a major problem of theirs. The enforcers are a small group. One is a wealthy gay man who has like a mansion, he has a gated property. He spends a lot of his time creating magical wards on his property. Another is a less powerful older black man, used to be a coach, a teacher, and used to be Mason's magic teacher. And this older black man is not magically gifted or powerful, but he is learned and he uses intricate and well-crafted designs to make his magic more powerful by kind of spreading out what little magic he does have over a wider area. And then the other person that they meet is very kind, gentle, nurturing. She works with an adoption agency in San Francisco, a foster home, I think more foster home kind of situation. But she is keeping an eye out for young San Franciscans that have magic, and then proceeds to kind of nurture them within the magical world to keep them from being preyed upon. But people are getting attacked, and a magic user that Mason knows, he sees at a party but without her djinn. And that's not necessarily strange, but what is noteworthy is that she looks crestfallen, defeated, kind of destroyed emotionally. He suspects that she lost her djinn and doesn't know if she was mistreating it or if it just wandered away on its own. But he does notice her, then he interacts with a couple other people. He does, in the narration, also mention that there are some non-magical people that, through running in the right circles, have knowledge about the magical world. And some of those informants, whether magical or non-magical, help Mason out in this story. A person is growing more and more powerful, and in this setting, that's really not a thing that can be done. You can learn how to be more meticulous and more methodical, and that can raise efficiency of the power you use, but your power doesn't grow once you reach adulthood. What you have is what you have. And apparently someone is growing more powerful, and some magic users are showing up completely blank, not having any magic left over. The plot is then, how is this person growing more powerful? How do we stop them from getting more powerful? And if they're already more powerful than us, how do we combat them such that they can be less detrimental to the magical community? The enforcers realize pretty quickly that they are less powerful, so they need to work smarter, not harder. And that is not necessarily how this book plays out. Mason, he's not a whiz kid, he's not a genius, but he has a lot of power, and he is able to use his power inefficiently, but in creative ways. He doesn't need formulas and specific chance or anything to do his work. He just can wordlessly use his magic in creative ways. And that is what makes him powerful, and what makes other powerful magic users in the San Francisco area jealous and envious of him. They also seek out a former enforcer, someone from a couple decades ago who is incredibly powerful and has kind of reached a sage-like enlightenment. And in this setting, they're talking about, there are some people that as they reach a certain stage in their magical journey, they kind of just step back and become enlightened or like a sage. They don't seek out more power. They just kind of become content and almost hippie-like in a way. They're like a laid back, let the world move at its own pace kind of stage in their life. So I thought this was really interesting. The setting is cool. Like the setting and its world building isn't detailed, but it is still fun and engaging. There are parts of this I'm not a fan of. One character ends up dying in a way that really just feels fridged more than anything else. And, any fridging is bad writing. And I think it works just a bit above fridging, where the character that dies isn't just killed to send a message, but is killed to further the villain's goals. So killing the person is productive for the villain. It's not just there to be shock value for the reader or for Mason. So, and then there's also another character that dies. Both of them that die are because they are meddling in a way that the villain needs them out of the way. There's some weird premonition that I thought was kind of weirdly worded, and it comes from someone who Mason doesn't expect to be magical, but sometimes oracles just, that foresight is the only magical side to them, and they don't actually use magic, it just comes out of them. And so this homeless man he sees and gives him this premonition. The premonition is important to the story, but it's kind of weird, to be honest. It's weirdly worded in a way that kind of feels uncomfortable at times. It's a good book, though. I liked it. It was not too long, only about 300 pages. I read this while rafting down the Grand Canyon. I had plenty of time to just sit back, relax, and read a book, and that's what I did. It only took a couple days of just reading while nothing else was going on, and I liked it. The book resolves itself in a way that leaves room for a sequel, and as it turns out, I have book 3 in the series. I think it's a 4 or 5 book series. I have book 1 and book 3. I'm not reading book 3 until I find book 2, and I'm not finding book 2. So what I'm instead gonna do is just find it at some random store, hopefully. I'm gonna stumble upon it when I'm least expecting it. And that's how I find a couple of my other books. I actively search for them, never find them, and then when I'm not looking for them, I find them and read them and have some fun with them. So, Dog Days is a really good book. I'm looking for book 2. I have book 3, and the money I paid for this one was more than worth it. If you like urban fantasy without too much edgy quality to it, then this is a good book for you. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.